Well, hello there, friends, and welcome to ReWoke, Rewriting Our Kids' Education podcast. I am your host, Michelle Person, and friends, we are on a journey. We are rethinking, re examining, and re educating ourselves and our children. We talk a lot on this show about preparing our kids for the 21st century. But what does that really mean? To me, it means making sure they have opportunities to think critically and creatively about the real world and its issues. I believe that our kids have the power to affect real change and that they can work to make a difference to solve some of those issues. My guest today, Michael Trezza, believes those are important skills as well and created an entire enrichment program to help students master those skills. I saw a quote on a blog a few weeks ago that read, "In the future, children will be required to be creative, innovative, collaborative, have problem solving skills, and an ability to adapt to change with resilience." That's a tall order to fill. And how the heck do you teach that? And oh, yeah, are you woke? The term 21st century skills is generally used to refer to certain core competencies, such as collaboration, digital literacy, critical thinking, and problem solving, that advocates believe educators need to teach to students to help them thrive in today's world. But in this era of mandated state tests, slash school funding, and teacher shortages, when is that ever supposed to happen? Enter Michael Trezza, a technical CEO and entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in software development. Michael combined his love of creating compelling online experiences with his passion for education and created a supplementary high school program that teaches these important skills to creative and curious high school students. Hey, Michael, how are you?
I'm fabulous, Michelle. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, and thank you so much for being here with us today to talk about your innovative after-school program. I can't wait to hear more about it.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate being here.
So, give us a little background. Tell us about what's your story? Like, what was your motivation for starting Giant Leaps Learning? Where did the idea come from? Because this isn't your primary business. This is something you kind of came into, correct?
Yeah, it is my primary business now, but I've been in tech for the last 20 years. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 21 years old, give or take. And my daughter, I'm 44 now, just for context. My daughter was born 5 years ago. She's just over 5 now. And when she was born, or when we found out that we were having a baby, I just started, everything changed. Are you a mother, Michelle?
I am. I have 3, okay. And my 5-year-old also just turned is 5.
Oh, wonder! It's such a fun age. It's such a fun age. You know, and everybody says like having a kid changes you for sure. And I didn't really understand what that meant until I realized I was having a baby. We were having a baby. When that came, when I realized that, I started to just think about the sort of world that I was bringing her into. Like I said, I've been in tech for 20 years. I have a kind of a pulse and a bead on how quickly tech is moving, on where the world may be going, on the fascinating advances in science and computing. And somebody asked me the question of, what do you think the world is going to be like when she's 18 or your age? And it just kind of put me on this like track of thinking of wow, I think it's actually going to be pretty different than my experience of 18 or 44. And so that was the beginning of the sort of the genesis for Giant Leaps, was starting to think about where the world was going. And my wife being in education as well. She's owned learning centers for the last 15 years, is an educator herself. So we've always had conversations around education, and we've had a lot of conversations around the deficiencies in traditional education. And I started to really look into how we were going to prepare this little girl for the world, and I found so many gaps in what's being taught in schools today versus what we feel the skills of the future are. And yeah, so I can expand in any direction, but that was the genesis. So that was where Giant Leap started.
Well, first of all, that's amazing because everything about Just Like Me Presents, this podcast, our new micro school that we are launching is all about the gaps in traditional
Yeah,
education. Like Just Like
yeah,
Me started out because there were gaps in literature. That grew into this podcast because there were
right,
gaps in education, which grew into our micro school because traditional work learning wasn't working. So like that
yeah,
whole once you realize it, it's almost like you have to take action if you want to make a difference. It's almost like you can't just sit and
yeah.
realize that there's this huge problem and not address it. Tell us
That's what I
more.
feel.
Yeah, tell us more about Giant Leaps. Like, what are your goals with the company? What is it exactly? Who do you serve? All of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, there's some very big audacious goals with the company, but I know I can start anywhere. Those are the ground level, but the idea is, I believe we're living in a world and in a time right now where there's a leadership deficit, um, and if we don't step in quickly and begin to empower our young people to become curious, capable, passionate, creative leaders who care about society in the future, then we're in a bit of a bind. Is how I see it as
Mhm.
society, right? Things are like everything from climate change to technological advancements. Things are moving very quickly, and we're running out of time to get these kids in positions to do the best work that they can do. Um, so I mean that's like sort of on the grand scale what our program is. It's an online after school enrichment program, and it's primarily designed for high school students.
Mhm.
And what the three things that we focus on are self-awareness, global awareness, and critical thinking skills. So what that means to us is the self-awareness component. If you help kids understand their natural strengths and interests, that produces things like reduced anxiety, that improved confidence, things that all kids right now need. There's anxiety and depression is an epidemic in teens right now.
Mhm.
The next thing is global awareness, and what that means to us is, school does a good job of teaching kids where the world has been and about history, but maybe not the best job of teaching kids where the world is going. And
Mhm.
somebody told me this a long time ago to always skate where the puck is going. It's a hockey reference. And I think it's a great one because if you're setting kids up for the world of today, the career world of today, you're way behind. By the time these kids get 10 years older and graduate high school, they're gonna be behind the ball. So what we do is we want to introduce them to the concepts of the technological concepts that are changing the world, the influences that are changing the world, from AI to cryptocurrency to gene editing, to these things that are going to redefine the workforce, and get them curious about the possibilities and the potentials of that world. And going back to the first one, the self-awareness, if they know their strengths and interests better, we can kind of overlay that with where the world is going, and find some real synergy for them. They can see themselves in this world, in this future world. And then the third thing was critical thinking skills, which everybody needs, and certainly the skills of the future are, I believe, in critical thinking. How to discern or discriminate between good and bad information, how to find information online. Certainly we need to teach kids how to memorize things. You should know your times tables. You should be able to memorize things, but that shouldn't be the focus of education. It really should be, I believe, around creative problem solving and innovation and critical thinking. And those are
Mhm.
that's the thrust of our program, is giving kids digital literacy skills to succeed in the future. So those three things are what our program is about.
And I guess my question is, those are all such important things.
Yeah,
Why do you think those skills aren't being taught in schools? And what can parents do to future proof their children and
yeah,
prepare them for the jobs that don't exist yet? Like how
yeah. I
how can
love
we
that.
teach parents to follow the puck?
Yeah, I love that. Great question. I'll answer the first one first, because I think there's, I mean, well, anyway, the first one around like why schools aren't teaching those sort of things. It's really difficult. So first of all, there's the question of, is um is the concept of confidence or depression and anxiety, like, is that a school's role to get involved with those sort of things? Second, I suppose, is it's really difficult to teach critical thinking skills or to test critical thinking skills. So a lot of these things are difficult to test. And what's the machine of education about? It's about testing and rankings and money, right? And if you can't test it, it's really difficult to justify some of these things. That's in some reason that's why I see things like art going away and creativity going away from schools, right? There's a hard ROI it's difficult to connect an ROI there. As critical as they are, it's difficult to test for them. So that's one of the reasons why I don't think it's really being addressed in schools. I'd love some of your thoughts on that as well.
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that we're in a culture where the most important thing is, can you test it? Can you prove that that they learned? And when you define learning specifically as a test score by a number, by a letter grade, you completely eliminate areas of learning that are just as important but are not quantifiable. Exactly. And I think that we have got, and everybody, there accountability. Like, we have to hold everybody accountable. We have to hold people accountable. We should also be realistic. And realistically, I think a lot of intelligence doesn't exist in a vacuum. And there's a lot of gray, and there is no room for gray in education right now. And that's unfortunate, because the gray is where the beauty is. And so I love that you recognize that, and that's why you created this program.
I think it's critical.
So what can parents do to future-proof their kids? Because parents are having the same thoughts you had when you found out you were going to be a dad. I want to make sure that my kid is best prepared as possible for the world that's coming. But obviously they're at school, and the school isn't doing it. So what can parents do? How can they step up?
I mean, kids need self-awareness. They need control over their emotions. They need to know how to speak clearly and communicate with people. These are things that parents can absolutely help with. Kids also need to hold a sort of a bright vision of the future is how I think of it. So what that means, like, for a parent, is have conversations with the kid, stressless conversations with the kid around where the world is going, what they might want to do in that world, or what their interests are about where the world is going. So not ones about college and SAT scores and about your major. Let's have some conversations with these kids about, what are your interests? How do you see that interest applying over the next 20 or 30 years? Have some real conversations about possibilities and potentials that are disconnected from the kind of like hamster wheel stressful outcomes, and that the kids and parent conversations usually have attached to them. I think that's maybe like one of the most important ones that I can think of right now.
And it's so frustrating. I have a 5-year-old, and I have a senior, or a rising senior.
There you go.
And so my rising senior, as we're talking about what she wants to do and where she wants to go, she's been a product of the traditional school system, obviously, and I put her in it, so I accept some of the culpability. But in trying to get her to understand right now, she's looking for colleges. She's been very narrow in where she's looking, because she wants one specific major. And if the colleges don't have that major, she's not looking at them.
Ruled out.
And I'm like, well, it's not really just you should really take some business classes. Most schools now have some entrepreneurship courses. You should be looking at, other, like, I'm trying to get in high school, I was like, it's great that you want to do creative writing. That's her thing. Creative writing only. Like, and I'm like, what about, like, newspaper will give you some editing skills, there are other, the yearbook, it will help you figure out how to edit and to do layout, and the things that will help you pay the bills for careers that possibly don't exist yet. Yes, everybody can write a book, but there are other skills that you can hone in on, that you can explore, and you don't necessarily have to major in the thing that you're going to do at college. Having that experience with a person who's been in, and I have to laugh, because she drank the Kool-Aid.
You know,
Right, right, right.
she has come out the person that school was supposed to make her be.
Exactly. The machine works. Yeah.
And as her mom, who
Uh,
is now growing into, like you, an entrepreneur, in their mid 40s, you
mhm.
know, I'm understanding that there's flexibility there, and that there are lessons I would like her to learn younger
Yeah.
than I figure them out.
Right.
So yes, definitely those conversations I think are so key. Trying to I honestly almost unteach what
Hmm.
we spend so much time letting the schools teach our kids, because
Right.
that's what we
Right.
send them.
Yeah, I
So
think disconnecting that is important. And somebody was talking to me once about their kid, who they're just interested in F1 racing, and he was trying to get him interested. Like the parent was trying to get him interested in other kind of like more serious things. And we had this conversation that changed the parents' kind of perception, and it was around like, okay, that's great. Your kid loves F1 racing. If they're interested in that, they think about all the opportunities in that interest that they could take part in. They could be an engineer, they can be a designer, they can be a CFO. There are an unlimited number of careers that exist inside of that interest area. So
hmm
that's what I kind of talk about a lot around parents is, don't discount a kid's interest if you don't see it having a real world applicability like straight away. That you have
hmm
to think about mixing and matching things and being creative with the kid's natural interests and strengths, and then tying real world applicability to it.
It's funny because that kind of was going to be my next question, which was
Mhm.
kind of, what advice do you have for parents to teach their teenagers? Because I know your program is primarily for
Mhm.
teens, to
Yeah.
be able to find opportunities and seize them and
Mhm.
apply them to their interests.
Mhm.
So you know, so you just talked about a little bit about having a parent have to have a mind shift.
Yeah, it's
Like,
true. Yeah.
how do you work with the kids? How do you work with the kids to get them to have that mind shift?
Yeah, I mean that's what our program does, and what we do is we introduce concepts. So first of all, we start with a strengths finder assessment, and then an interest assessment. So just baseline, we have a sense of what their interests are. The first module they get assigned to is, or they get assigned, is something that's squarely in their interests. So it may be something like, we've got a new student who's interested in medicine, neuroscience, and gaming, which is really interesting really combination. So her first module is on life extension and is regenerative medicine. So the prompt that she gets kind of assigned at first is, imagine a world where we could pause or reverse human aging. That's like day one, right? That's a pretty heavy concept. So what that does is, we're starting to have a blue sky conversation with this student around where the world is going. So just, Michelle, for a second, imagine that. Imagine a world where we could pause or reverse human aging.
hmm
What about that interests you? Something must be interesting to you about that. There's almost no way that you couldn't be, right? Right. But is it like, where does your mind go to? Does it go to, oh wow, the cultural implications? I can't imagine what family dynamic looks like. Okay, what about maybe food shortages? That's an interesting one. Or ecology, overpopulation and climate change. Okay, you see where I'm going? Like, we take a prompt like that we know the student is interested in on some level, and then we ferret out where their sort of other interests lead them. And then
hmm
what we do is start to have discussions around those things. So let's say ecology is what's interesting to you around that, or overpopulation. What do you think some of the challenges are going to be in that world, and how do you think we can overcome some of those? So we
hmm
do a lot of creative problem solving in there, and over the course of the weeks of the program, they start to picture how they can be involved in the solution of these problems. And
hmm
once they've done that one time, they can apply that thinking to a lot of different things. So in the problems that we see in the world, they can start thinking of how to be part of the solution, and not be like I hate to use the term victim, but not have the world be imposed upon them.
Right, right, right. I love
Does that
that.
answer the question a little bit?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
It really does. And so, can you share with our parents before we get out of here, like any other tips or resources for parents who are looking to cultivate those skills? Obviously, Giant Leaps Learning is one they should definitely check out. It's
Yeah.
online, so I'm assuming it doesn't matter where you live
That's
to
right.
be able to participate in the program.
No, it
But
doesn't.
are there any other tips or resources that you frequent or that you guys draw inspiration from, or anything like that?
Yeah, we're actually putting a guide together. I've been getting that question a lot lately. Is like, where do parents find out about where the world is going? You're right. If we're talking about this with kids, we are putting a guide together for that. And check our website; it's coming soon. But I would say things like, just be careful of the news you take in, your social media feeds, and start looking more at documentaries, podcasts. There's some fabulous everything from Tim Ferriss to one of my favorites recently is Lex Friedman. His podcast is on all sorts of fascinating topics, mostly revolving around where the world is going. And yeah, that's the best I could give you at the moment around those
Okay.
sort of things. Yeah.
Well, that's no problem, because everybody can drop by the website and pick up that guide when it's ready, and they can check it out for themselves, and they can share this podcast and any others that might interest them with other people, and they'll just continue that learning and keep following that puck.
Exactly.
Michael, where can listeners contact you if they want to learn more about Giant Leaps Learning?
Yeah, giantleapslearning.com. Straightforward as that. And anybody feels free to reach me at michael@giantleapslearning.com. I'd love to answer your questions or start a conversation.
Awesome. Michael, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate the opportunity.
Follow the puck. Always look to where the world is going so you don't get left behind. Harder for some of us old fogies, but a mindset easily cultivated with kids. Thank you again to our guest, Michael Trezza, and thank you to you for listening. Show notes and resources to the things we discussed are available on our website at www.justlikemepresents.com. Share this podcast with other parents and educators in your circle, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you like what you heard, leave us a review. Reviews help others discover our show and begin their woke journey. Have a great week, and remember, if our children can see it, they can achieve it.